This week on Painting Lines.
Kind of like the guys that just like frustrate their opponents, to be honest.
I guess we could see what the type of person you are.
Yeah.
Do you think Tsitsipas is clutch now? You think he kicked it up a gear?
Welcome to the Painting Lines podcast, your one-stop shop for all things tennis. Join Erik and Aidan in their discussion for updates on news and pop culture, and from hot takes to betting, they've got you covered.
Ready? Welcome back to Painting Lines. Last week we kicked off the 2024 season with some tournament recaps and other notable events. This week we'll be breaking down the first week of the Australian Open and giving a preview on what we're seeing happening in the second week. So with that being said, Aidan, what are your thoughts on the tournament so far?
First off, a lot of close matches and not a lot of upsets. There were like 7 or 8 matches where they went to 5 sets and then the favored guy ended up winning. So good matches to see, but for me, it's more interesting when you see those upsets actually happen and you get these weird matchups going into the third and fourth round versus all the top guys are still in it. There's some positives to that, but I think there's more positives when the underdogs sometimes get through. But I know that's not necessarily what you prefer. So what are your thoughts on it?
No, you're right. I definitely don't prefer upsets. And I guess there's two main reasons why I like to see like heavy hitters, like the heavyweight top guys. The first one being there's less of a chance of a lopsided match later on. So if you have, an upset versus a big guy, and then that relatively unknown person moves on to the next round and faces, another top guy, I'd rather see the two top guys play each other and see a good tennis match than the possibility of the unknown guy who essentially got lucky. It was a fluke that he won in the first place. Play in the next round versus a top guy and then lose. And then we don't get to see a high quality tennis match. We see very lopsided. And then the other reason why I don't like upsets is because I love when two top players have a history against each other and there's like a potential rivalry brewing and it just creates more drama. And I think it's better for the sport.
Yeah, I mean, the other side of that, like if the top guys win all the time, you don't get to see runs like Shelton at the US Open. And I think that was massive for the sport because I think he brought a lot of excitement to that tournament. And if he had lost in the third round or something, it would have been not that exciting of a tournament outside of that. Him being there brought a lot to it. And I think that's something that comes with the underdogs winning.
That's fair, but I think when I say underdog, I don't mean like a Ben Shelton. I thought Ben Shelton is a household name at this point going into the US Open. So I'm talking about people that are ranked outside the top 100 that you've never really heard of.
Yeah, but I feel like that's much more rare that
No, you're right. You're right.
I do see what you're saying though, yeah, where some of the time like Altmaier beating Sinner at the French Open knocks him out. You don't get to see Sinner in the later rounds, which is a
Exactly.
negative overall because Altmaier's probably not going to make a deep run.
Exact. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll change my thinking here
To an
soon.
extent, I think what happens in those situations is if the underdog wins, you kind of hope that they then do make a run because it feels much more like a fluke victory if they only beat the one person.
Exactly. Yeah. Because yeah, you don't want to see a lopsided tennis match,
Yeah,
especially in a grand slam too.
100%. Yeah.
But hey, why don't we get into it? So we'll be breaking it down day by day. Day one, first one on the docket was Rublev's close call. So he went to a fifth set tiebreaker with Brazilian Thiago Seyboth Wild. He was actually down 4-1 in the fifth set tiebreaker too, came back to win 10-6. And what I thought was interesting about this match was in his post-match interview or on-court interview, he said when he was down 4-1, he essentially gave up. He was like mentally relieved. He said, he's like, all right, it's just not my day. And that allowed him to just kind of loosen up and play more free. And then he ended up winning.
Not necessarily the best way of dealing with the pressure, I feel like, but it was effective for him in that situation.
Yeah, because he's usually the one to lose his cool and just start deteriorating fast.
I think it's exactly that is usually when he's in a situation like I'm down 4-1 in a tiebreak, he gets more pressure on himself. And in this situation, he was like, it doesn't matter. I'm going to lose anyway. And that kind of helped him relieve the pressure.
Exactly. And another thing that I thought was pretty funny that he brought up was Sabath Wild kind of has a history of upsetting Russians. So he took out Daniil Medvedev in the first round of Roland Garros last year. And he said that that was kind of in the back of his mind during the match. He was thinking about that.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, history, he's done it one time, but I see what he's saying. Yeah, that it's happened in the past, but I don't know if I would consider it happening one time to be a history of him beating Russians. But
Hey.
yeah,
So if he would have beaten Rublev, then
then he
it's
would have
fair
a
to
history of
say he has
beating
a
Russians
history.
because he's done
Okay.
it multiple times. I think. Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. And then the other match, like you said, we've had a lot of top seeds go 5 sets, but not actually get upset. So we had Fritz, he outlasts Diaz Acosta in a 5 setter. What do you think? Do you think this is a bad sign that it was that close?
I do think that because especially the Australian Open where obviously this year the weather hasn't been like brutal, it hasn't been like killer heat all the time, but I think just being on court for a long time in those early matches just is not a positive sign for later on in the tournament when you're going to be tired no matter what. I think having fresher legs becomes much more important in those later rounds. And so I think it is a bad sign because I think it's going to drain him for later rounds.
I see where you're coming from the like physical standpoint, but how about mental? Because personally, I don't think it's that big of a deal that he went 5 sets. He was that close this early on to a no name because if you look at Rublev, he also went the 5 sets and then he recently just beat Korda in three
Yeah.
easily. So I
I
think you're able to bounce back from it.
Yeah, I think mentally it's not a negative at all because I think it
Hmm.
almost could be considered a positive mentally because you know, okay, I have the ability to go 5 sets this year and get the win because you don't necessarily know coming into it, the tournament, I have the fitness this year to go 5 sets. I like everybody trains and hopes that they do, but once you've actually done it, you're like, I can go 5 sets in this tournament. That's a mental positive, and you know that you can win in 5 sets. But the physical component, I think, is a much bigger detractor there.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point about the confidence in going the 5 sets, knowing that you can handle it. So while we're on Americans, let's hit Tiafo. So he beat Chorch, and I was kind of nervous for Tiafo going into this match because the last time they played each other in 2018, which I know is a while ago, Chorch actually won. So big win for Tiafo. Kind of got a tough draw.
Yeah, I think with Tiafo, it's a positive step for him. But obviously, as we're going to get into, it didn't really materialize into anything that he was really hoping for in those later rounds.
Yeah. Now we have day two, where starting off Shelton beating Batista Agut in 3 sets. That was kind of surprising. What do you think? Because Batista Agut's a veteran, solid player.
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where Bautista Agut, I think, was injured last year, and he's obviously pretty old. So it may be a little bit late in his career to stage a full comeback. I thought that it might be a tough draw for Shelton because, like you said, Bautista Agut, veteran of the tour, and I thought it could be a tough matchup, but didn't end up being one for Shelton. And honestly, an impressive victory for him, beating him in three.
Yeah, no, he pumped out 14 aces and 53 winners. So he's playing aggressively. And that injury Bautista Agut suffered, I was actually reading up on it. I think it was like a horse riding accident, which is pretty
Oh,
crazy.
jeez.
I know, not even
Yeah,
tennis.
if he was playing football, he would have gotten his entire contract just suspended for something like
Right,
that.
right. Good thing tennis is so
Yeah,
individualistic. But
exactly.
all right, how about the battle of the old men? Wawrinka Manarino, 38 versus 36
Dude, that was a it's
years
crazy
old.
that that matchup just happened to occur in this tournament. It's an interesting matchup because it's definitely so much more focused on the finesse aspect and the placement of the ball rather than like physical ability between these two guys.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I was going for Stan. I don't know about you. So when I actually watched this match and when it did go into the fifth set, I was pretty pumped for him because, you just forced it and then he got bageled 6-0, which, hate to see. I feel like that rarely happens too, especially with a player like Stan.
Yeah, I think it's a situation where Manarino's just established himself. He's a top 20 guy now, and he's playing Vavrinka, who is, if you look at it, a top 60 guy now. So if you just look at that comparison, even the fact that it went to 5 sets is pretty close. Obviously, there's a lot more history there in reality, but I still think it was a good performance of Vavrinka to even force it to 5 sets.
Yeah. So do you think Wawrinka lost 6-0 in the last set because he essentially just gave up after the first break? You know what I
I
mean?
I think more like he probably just gassed out being 38 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, that
I
was
think maybe to an extent he gave up after the first break, but it was more like I just don't have the fitness to pull this match back at this point.
mhm. Yeah. Well, on the bright side, he said he'd like to come back next year. So hopefully we didn't see him in his last Australian Open, especially since he's a former champion.
Definitely would be a positive to see him back.
Well, that's a good transition into our next match. Murray.
Yeah, tough. Really a tough loss. Not and it wasn't like Wawrinka losing to Manarino. This was a match where Murray kind of got dominated.
Yeah. Not really much here to say on my part. I don't know. We talked about Murray last week on the podcast, how like he has nothing to prove, but he's just doing it for the love of the game. And like this is a great point. Do you still love the game when you're just early exiting every single tournament?
Yeah, I just think it's a tough thing to see. A guy like Murray who
Hmm.
really is just trying to fight in those last couple years of his career and get a little bit of success so that he can feel okay retiring. And it's not working out for him right now.
Yeah, it's not going his way. But so now we have an upset, not a major upset, but kind of on a minor scale here where Kaboli took down Jari. I was pretty bummed. I'm a huge Jari fan. You know that.
Yeah, I think this is a situation where it was maybe the only like medium to big upset, yeah, of the first couple rounds because obviously Jari isn't like a top 5, top 10 guy, but still the fact that he's losing the first round is a pretty big shocker. Kind of expected Jari to be easily moving through at least the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, no, definitely. And he was up 5-3 in the final set too.
Oh
That's
my
tough.
god.
Yeah, that is tough.
And then lost 4 games straight, right?
Yeah, a little bit of
Yeah.
controversy too. So something happened. He was serving at 5-6 and he got a point penalty because a ball had fallen out of his pocket mid-point for the second time.
Ah,
And
he's
that's
got
just,
a
yeah, and then 3 points later he loses the match.
yeah, he's got to
So,
sue Asics for screwing
dude,
him.
I know. How does that happen? I've personally never seen it. Have you?
Not really, no. I just think
Two
that
times
usually
in one
they have
match.
maximum 2 balls in their pocket, right? So if their pocket
Yeah.
can't fit 2 balls in it, that's pretty insane.
Yeah. That's funny. A6. Hey, figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. You're making tennis shorts, man. Like they have to be able to
Yeah.
carry tennis balls in them.
I know when I play, sometimes I'll shove like 4 or 5 in there.
Yeah,
Then I see
exactly.
when one comes out.
Yeah, you're like, okay, that's understandable.
On to day three. Runa beating Nishioka. A little bit of drama. I mean, Boris Becker didn't make the trip to Australia, which I thought was a little strange. And then his new coach, Federer's former coach, Luthi, was there.
I don't think it was like a strife thing with other people in
Mhm.
the box. I think it was probably just like either he had some sort of conflict with making the trip, or maybe he had an issue with just like getting into Australia. I know they're sometimes known to restrict people like Djokovic, but yeah, I don't think it was a serious thing, not that I know of at least.
Yeah, so you don't think that's it's a situation where there's too many chefs in the kitchen, kind of butting heads?
I hope
No.
not. For
Yeah.
Rune's sake, I hope not.
Yeah, I know. Who knows? Maybe, yeah, like you said, there's some travel restrictions, maybe because he's on probation or something.
Could be,
Can't leave
yeah.
the country.
That yeah. Yeah, can't leave the EU. Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
possibility.
hey, exactly. All right, how about Dimitrov and Fusovic? I thought this was a good match, and I thought Grigor had a pretty funny quote because he said that Fusovic was one of the strongest guys on tour. And you always see Vucevic just taking off his shirt, flexing his muscles. He's definitely like jacked and shredded. But I was wondering if Grigor kind of meant it as a way like, oh yeah, he's strong, he hits the hell out of the ball, or he's just because of the way he looks like, freaking a bodybuilder.
Probably both would be my guess. I mean, I think probably he has a lot of functional strength with being jacked. So that probably translates to him hitting the ball pretty hard.
Yeah, yeah. But he looks good out there, and we'll see him continue to advance. Yeah, then we had Rude cruise through Ramos Vinulas in 3 sets. I was pumped about this because you know me, I'm a huge Rude fan. And, he hit 19 winners and won 83% of his first serves. So he's obviously, playing lights out. I was actually texting with one of my buddies about Rude, and he just looked phenomenal out there.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely looked good in these first couple rounds.
Hmm. All right, on to day four, and let's start with all these Americans. So Sheldon beats the Aussie O'Connell, which that's got to be hard to play, an Aussie at the Australian Open. It was pretty funny. He said that he's been, hearing this chant in his sleep. It's like, Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. Oi,
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 oi, oi.
oi.
Yeah, the classic Aussie chant.
Ben really went to the serve and volley in this match too. And it wasn't always effective. I think it was one of those where it only worked because O'Connell was kind of an inferior player.
I mean, his style isn't necessarily to serve and volley. Like, obviously, he has
Mhm.
a really strong serve, but that doesn't necessarily mean he has to serve and volley. He can more do like a 1-2 where he serves and then takes a hard forehand or something like that and puts that away rather than having to come all the way to the net.
Yeah, exactly. He's really good at that serve out wide that just opens up the court and then pushes that forehand, like you said, kind of down the line, just follows it up. Sometimes it's a winner, sometimes he follows it up with an easy volley.
Exactly, exactly. Using the serve as a tool, but not necessarily completely relying on it.
So the next American, Fritz, just blew by Gaston, which I was excited because I hate to talk bad about players on tour, but I'm just not a fan of Gaston. I don't like his attitude out there, and I don't think he's a great sport.
Yeah. Isn't he the guy that threw a ball in the court and then tried
Yeah,
to say that, oh, we have to replay the point? Unless I'm
yeah.
mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that was him.
No, it was. It was. And at the US Open, I watched him in person play Bublik a couple years ago. And he took his water bottle and just like freaking smashed it and threw it on the court. And then one of the ball kids picked up the water bottle and gave it back to him. And then he just did it again.
Jesus. The ball kid was like, I want to put it what'll
Yeah.
happen if I give him the water bottle back.
Yeah. But a good quote that Fritz threw out here was he can really mess with someone's rhythm with all of his slices, drop shots, and the fact that he's a lefty. But I stuck to my game plan. So that shows that Fritz is not getting deterred by Gaston's little antics. And hey, he is a distracting player.
I mean, it sounds like he's almost describing Manarino there, messing with the rhythm slices, lefty.
Dude, maybe it's a French thing.
Exactly. In France, they just teach you like, as long as it works, you can do it.
Oh, that's funny. And then we have the next two Americans, which unfortunately lost. So first, Tiafo losing to Mahach. Dude, what's going on with Tiafo? I feel like he should not be losing to Mahach, and he should be making deeper runs in Grand Slams.
100%. I mean, if you're looking at his ranking and how he was able to do in some like the past years, I mean, making the semifinal in the US Open 2 years ago, like you would expect him to be able to at least make it through the first few rounds in a tournament like this. But I think just since the US Open last year, he hasn't really been playing as well. I think he probably has a losing record since then. I think he's just in a slump. I think that just happens with people sometimes. And it's going to be important whether or not he can get out of the slump or whether he just stays in that slump and kind of slides down, like we saw with someone like FAA.
Yeah, exactly. And I know we've talked about this offline, but I personally think it was a fluke that he made it to the semis. I think that's probably the furthest he'll ever get in a Grand Slam. And I don't know if you've seen Breakpoint or not, but a good point that his coach brings up is he's not exactly serious enough about it. Like he wishes Francis was way more dialed in, way more serious because after a semifinal run, he's now getting brand deals. He's invited to parties. He's hanging out with professional athletes, celebrities, sitting courtside. And all that is kind of taking away from his tennis. But hey, to each their own. Like maybe his goal in life is to do all those things, right? Like use tennis as a way of life, a career. He's making connections that he never would have before instead of just living like a dark, lonely, but successful tennis career.
Yeah, I think what you see there is kind of like the Shaq versus Kobe sort of thing,
Mhm.
where Shaq obviously he worked really hard when he was in the NBA, but he also had fun with it. Whereas every story you hear about Kobe is like Kobe was just constantly working. He was constantly in the gym. He was constantly getting shots up. So you look at those two guys, and it's like you can still have a great amount of success if you aren't 100% focused on tennis. Tiago still had a lot of success, but he's not necessarily maximizing his success.
Right. Yeah, that's a great analogy. And I think maybe we will see after this slump or however long this slump continues that he'll kick it into a new gear. He'll be like, all right, enough of this shit. I'm ready to get back on top. Hopefully we see that Francis soon.
100%.
And then the next American, Eubanks, he loses to Rublev in 3 sets. I don't really have much to say on this.
Yeah, I think there isn't really much to say. I think this is just a tough matchup for Eubanks. I mean, he's a good player, and I think he made it as far as he's really expected to. He's not really expected to beat Rublev, who is a top 5 guy.
Yeah. And I love how, we talked about Rublev in the past as just consistently beating guys, what, outside the top five or the top 10, where like he gets his job done. He knows what he's got to do and he'll do it.
Yeah.
And Eubanks is tricky. He's a tough opponent. The next match I want to talk about is Tsitsipas. I thought he had an impressive win over Thompson because, as I mentioned before, I think it's really tough to play an Australian at the Australian Open because the crowd is very rowdy and Tsitsipas isn't the most mentally stable guy, and Thompson is a high quality player. So, we saw a lot of clutch moments with Tsitsipas. He actually held on to a 13-minute service game, saved 4 set points, and even said he lived off the adrenaline from that match. Do you think Tsitsipas is clutch now? You think he kicked it up a gear?
We've talked about in the past. I think Tsitsipas just plays well at the beginning of the year.
Mhm.
Like he consistently has done well in the Australian Open. He does well in the French Open. I think it's just one of those things where he is a guy that not necessarily physically, maybe it's physical, but I think it's more just mentally as the year goes on. He gets kind of more beaten down. And I think the media is a little bit harsh on Tsitsipas a lot of the time. And I think that also contributes to it. When he gets to come off of a break, I think he gets a mental reset. And so that's why I think he consistently does pretty well in Australia. And I think that's why he's doing pretty well this year.
Yeah, no, I agree that the media is pretty hard on him, but he kind of sets himself up sometimes. I'm just glad that he's playing back to the level as he was before because he is a top guy, and it would have made me sad to see him early exit from Australia. It really would have.
Yeah, it would have been a pretty big bummer for him. Also, would have been a bummer for his ranking because obviously, when you make the finals the year before, that kind of bolsters your ranking for the entire
Mhm.
year. And if he had started off on a wrong foot here, it wouldn't have been great for him. But yeah, you want to go on to day 5?
Yeah, yeah. Let's go. Let's go day 5. So we finally have a big upset. Runa loses to Kazo. So my kind of synopsis of the match was Runa made a lot of errors. He didn't necessarily get outplayed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is kind of a common theme when you do see Runa lose. I feel like most of the time Runa doesn't fall into a pattern where he's just trying to out rally his opponent. Like he goes for bigger shots, I think when he's losing rather than going for safer shots.
Mhm.
And so I think that's definitely a big factor why he lost is just he wasn't totally in control of his shots today or on that
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, I don't know about you, and I know tennis players are pretty superstitious. Just wanted to bring up the point that he doesn't usually wear a tank top or a cutoff, and he was wearing one, and then he actually changed into a shirt after going down love two. I bet he was thinking like, dude, I got to do everything I can to change this up. Like whether it's my clothes, something's got to change.
Yeah, I think that's a situation where it's like, yeah, he's looking for a mental reset of some
Hmm.
kind. And whether that's just changing his clothes, whether it's like taking a hat off, putting a hat on, he's just trying to figure out. Like, obviously, I don't think he believes that, oh, I only win when I'm wearing a regular t shirt. I think it's more like he's just trying to change something. In the end, didn't really matter.
I know, dude. I'm bummed because, like I said, I don't like these upsets, and I really was thinking that Rune was gonna like kick it up a notch this year. But all right, well, this next match was absolutely insane. Rude beating Purcell was so exciting. Went down to a fifth set tiebreaker. And I thought for a second Rude was actually going to lose because Purcell was really utilizing his serve and volley, and Rude was just standing so far back, like as he always does. And I personally think that if Purcell was more precise and cleaner with his volleys, he would have won because there's a lot of times where Purcell would push his volleys long or out or even like not do enough with them where, Rude could hit an easy passing shot. But the ones that did, Rude could not defend against it.
And that's kind of shocking that he wasn't doing the volleys well because Purcell, I think, is actually a very good doubles player.
Yeah, no,
And
so it's not that he wasn't doing them well. I'm just saying he made a few errors that could have changed the tide of the match.
maybe the pressure got to him of playing a guy like Rude, but it's one of those situations where, like we've talked about, a couple of points here or there can really decide how a match ends up going.
Yeah, like the old adage, football is a game of inches, whereas, tennis is a game of centimeters too, but it also comes down to 1 or 2 points here and there. It's crazy.
Exactly,
But
especially in a tight match like this.
And yeah, exactly. And then Purcell being Australian too. I think Rude handled the crowd perfectly because he's got that stoic, Norwegian mentality. You never really see him show emotion. So I feel like he wasn't even phased by all that. And like you said, dude, Purcell is a great doubles player. So when I'm watching this match, I'm thinking, how the hell is he losing? Or how the hell is it this tight with this guy who plays doubles?
Yeah.
And then this next match also went into a fifth set tiebreaker. Zverev beating Klein. Dude, Klein, Klein was playing lights out, I gotta say. He actually had more winners than Zverev, but then on the other hand, had 83 unforced errors. So this is the classic case of just playing free and loose tennis. It can work in your favor, but then it just wasn't enough in the end to take down Zverev.
Yeah, I think in the end, like someone like Klein kind of has to play that way when he's up against a really good opponent like Zverev, because if he plays his normal, more safe version of his game, he's just not going to beat someone like Zverev. Zverev
Mhm.
probably has stronger tools than he does. But if he plays free, he plays loose, he can maybe get the upset. In the end, it wasn't enough today, but he probably used the right strategy in the end.
Yeah, definitely. And then another pretty crazy moment in this match was so in the fifth set tiebreaker, he was down 7-8 and he had an easy backhand volley that he should have put away, but that he put into the net. And you should have seen his face after this. Like he looked like he saw a ghost. He was like, oh my God, I cannot believe I just put that in the net. Because when players make an error, it's usually like, all right, brush it off. They don't spend more than a couple seconds thinking about it. Once he put it into the net, he like dropped down into a squat position and just stared for a solid 3 seconds, like with his hand on his head, like what just happened?
Yeah, like you're gonna lose after you make that, especially
Oh,
at
yeah.
that point. Like he just gave up. It's now match point against him, and
hmm
it's because of something that he really had in his control.
Exactly, in his control. But dude, it was also kind of frustrating watching Klein because he was playing so free and loose. He was taking so many chances where I wanted Zverev. I personally wanted Zverev to win, but it was still frustrating to watch Klein make errors. I was like, why are you doing that? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I think that's like we were saying. The only reason it was that close though is because he was going for those risks,
Yeah,
probably.
yeah, I guess so. I guess so. And then, dude, another close match. Medvedev surviving. Well, all right, close as in it went 5 sets.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I think it wasn't as close as it seemed because I don't think Medvedev was really as much in danger as the score kind of shows. It kind of reminds me of that match that Djokovic had at the US Open where he lost the first 2 sets. Even though Medvedev was down 2 sets against a guy like Rusevori, who's a good player, I felt like Medvedev always had the ability to kick it into that next gear. Like it felt like he wasn't playing at his peak level of his own accord almost in those first 2 sets. And then he lost and he felt like, okay, now I'm going to have to actually try full out. I don't know necessarily if that's true, but that's kind of how it felt to me in this match. And then obviously, as soon as he started to come back, he took all the momentum and was able to win it in 5. Even though in the fourth it did go to a tiebreak that could have been for the match, but in the end, Medvedev, yeah, survives, gets it done.
I 100% agree with you. When I was watching this, even though Medvedev was down love too, I still had no doubt in my mind that he was going to win. I don't know why. I just felt it. And I even tried to make a bet. Like I was looking at the lines, like, oh, dude, this will be the perfect time to hammer Medvedev because he's down love too. But they were all locked. The lines were locked. And I just never really went back to it. I was busy. Something came up. But I really wish I would have placed a bet on Medvedev when he was down love too.
I think with someone like Djokovic and Medvedev, you don't expect them to really lose in straight sets. And if they go down love 2, you're like, okay, well, they're probably going to win this third because they're not going to lose in straight sets. It's just not going to happen. And then once they win this third set, they're going to have the momentum going into the fourth. And then if they win the next 2 sets, they're going to have complete momentum going into the fifth. So you're not really that worried about it, even though it feels like, oh, they're down 2 sets. They're playing to survive.
Yeah. I wonder what's more challenging, being up to love and then losing the next 2 sets, but then coming back and winning the fifth set, or coming back from love two and just winning 3 straight sets.
I think if you're looking at just difficulty overall, probably the second one because you have to win 3 sets still. I
Mhm.
think mentally, when you get to, if you're talking just one set, I think that if you win the first two and then you lose two in a row, that's got to be a tough mental challenge to just come back and win that fifth.
Yeah, I know. So it's kind of once that fifth happened, Rusevoy was kind of game over. And you saw it in the score.
Yeah,
The score of the last
exactly.
set, 6
Yeah,
0.
dominated him.
All right. You want to hop into day 6?
Yeah, day 6. So yeah, Sinner and Deminar both continue to kind of cruise through the tournament. One thing that I wanted to bring up about these guys is that they have both spent very minimal time on the court so far, because Sinner obviously has won all of his matches in straight sets, and not necessarily like even close sets. Like, he's been pretty much just crushing his opponents. Same thing with Deminar to an extent. I mean, in his first round match, he played Raonic and he actually lost one of his sets, but he still had kind of minimal time on court because Raonic ended up pulling out in the third set. So I think this is going to be massive for both of them, because as you look at the later rounds, they're going to have significantly less time on court compared to some of the guys they're going to be coming up against.
Yeah, like they are going to be fresh.
For them, it's going to be like borderline like it's a first round match coming into some of these later rounds when they get a day off and they're just chilling, and they're coming up against a guy that, like a Manarino, who's played 3 5-setters, and you're like, okay, this guy is exhausted.
Yeah, and 36.
Exactly. But speaking of Manarino, he ended up pulling off the big upset for this day, which was him beating Shelton. An impressive win, but then he can't be really a great situation for him now that he's coming up against Djokovic the next round.
Yeah, well, I feel like this is the perfect matchup for Manarino, like playing against the Shelton, because Manarino's just sit back, absorbs pace, whereas Shelton's aggressive. I think Manarino is just like, all right, well, I can outlast him. Like I know that I just need to play my game, stick to my strategy, and eventually Shelton will kind of beat himself, like make the errors and just kind of go off the rails.
Yeah. One thing that I saw was that apparently Manarino has one of the lowest string tensions on the entire tour. It's like 20 something pounds. And so that just means that his racket, it makes sense with his playing style, because if you look at his strokes, it's like he has no backswing, it feels like.
Right.
It seems like he just kind of pushes the ball over. But when you have really loose strings, they kind of do a lot of the work for you. But I feel like also when you're coming up against someone like Shelton, who just hits the ball super hard,
Mhm.
all of a sudden you can just kind of have your racket absorb a lot of that pace as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, yeah, Manarino has so much control already, right? He doesn't need the high string tension. And also with Shelton, he's young, so he's gonna hit the shit out of the ball whenever he can. Whereas Manarino, he's old, he's been around. He knows that it's better to have more control and be more accurate than it is to just absolutely crush the ball like you can do when you're younger.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the feeling of this match was kind of shown maybe in the first set tiebreak, where Manarino ended up winning. The point he won was just an unforced error by Shelton, where Manarino put a relatively easy ball to Shelton's backhand, I want to say, and Shelton stepped up to it and just overhit it, and put it in the net.
Yeah.
And Manarino just took the set like that. It wasn't like he outplayed him in that point. He just kind of gave Shelton the ball, maybe a little bit off speed that Shelton didn't hit correctly.
Yeah, that's just Manarino having the experience and the age and like the veteran status of just knowing how to play his opponent.
Exactly. But yeah, going into the next couple rounds, I kind of want to do this segment called the Grand Slam Pick'em. So, looking at the next matchups in round 3 and 4, we're just going to give our takes on who we think is going to win in those couple rounds. So, do you write yours down, Eric?
Yeah, I wrote mine down, so you have not seen them.
Yeah,
Got them right here.
exactly. I had a couple big upsets here. A lot of favorites winning in my opinion, especially based on how this tournament has gone so far. But let's just start it off here. I took Paul over Ketsmanovic,
Yep, me too. Go USA.
Alcaraz over Shang.
Yep, it's kind of an obvious.
Yeah. What about Hurkacz Humbert? I took Hurkacz in that one as well.
I also took Hurkacz. I actually left this one for last. I had it written down and I was like, I don't know who to pick. But I think if Hurkacz can serve well, then he's got it.
Exactly my mindset. Yeah, I think Hurkacz's serve is just going to be too big for him in the end.
Hmm.
I took Greek Sport over Kazo.
No, I took Kazo because I think he's rolling with the confidence.
Greek Sport has beaten Safulin in the first round, and then he beat Fields in the second round. So I think he's playing really well in those
Hmm.
first couple matches. And obviously, Kazo has confidence after he just won that last round match. But I think Greek Sport gets it done here.
Yeah, no, those are two very impressive wins. So my reason for Kazo is I think every tournament, every Grand Slam has to have a magical run. I think last year was Ben Shelton. I think we see it here with him.
Well, we'll see what happens
We'll
there.
see.
Let's
We'll
let's
see.
let's let's go into the next one. Dimitrov versus Borges. I took Borges. I think Borges is going to pull off a massive upset in this third round match.
All right, I took Dimitrov. He's looking fit and he's playing his best tennis he has in a while.
Dimitrov is definitely playing well, but I think Borges is just going to be a shocker here because he won his first two matchups in straight sets. And I think he's going to be very fresh coming into this third round match. And even though Dimitrov has only dropped one set in his first two matches, I think that's actually going to play a huge factor in this match.
Mm.
Then Rude versus Nori. I'm taking Nori.
I took Rude.
Yeah, for me, I think that Rude looked very beatable in his last match. Obviously, he started off the tournament really hot, like we talked about, but I think that he looked very beatable in his last match. And I think Nori is going to take advantage of that. I also think Nori is going to be playing a little bit angry because he's actually never beaten Rude before. And I think this is going to be his time.
Mm.
Then the next one, I'm going Medvedev over FAA.
Yeah, I chose Medvedev too.
That would have been a shocker if I'd pulled out the FAA pick there.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
thinking for this, it could be either a very tight match and can go 5 sets, or just be super lopsided towards Medvedev.
Yeah, I think this is one of those situations where, I mean, Medvedev did lose to a Canadian guy early last year, so you never know. That then it was Shapovalov, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's tough for me to pick FAA after all the the kind of negative stuff I've said about him.
yeah,
But yeah, let's go to the next one. Zverev over Mickelson.
yeah. I chose Zverev too.
I'd like to see Mickelson win, but I just
Me
don't
too.
think he has the experience to beat Zverev at this point.
I was gonna say, I think the fact that Zverev had such a hard time against Klein, I think he essentially got the butterflies out, so like he'll know how to play a worse player now.
Yeah. My kind of last upset I picked was this one, Deminar over Rublev.
Yeah, I also chose Deminar over Rublev.
Yeah, I mean, I think Australian Open, like you said,
Hmm.
that's going to be a positive there. And I also think just the time on court. I've been harping on this time on court aspect. I don't know if it's going to play as much of a role as I'm saying it will, but Deminar having very little time on court, I think is going to be very helpful for him.
Yeah, I'll get more into it in my bet of the week too.
Sounds good. Tsitsipas over Fritz.
I'm taking Fritz.
You're taking Fritz here.
I'm taking Fritz because emotionally, I gotta go with Fritz, the American. And honestly, I think Fritz, he's itching to win against Tsitsipas because his record is 1-3 head to head, and I think he's, kind of pissed off for that.
Yeah, I think Tsitsipas is just playing well, which is why I'm going with him.
Mhm.
I think he's been playing pretty solid this tournament. So,
Yeah.
but then I think maybe my biggest lock. I mean, I don't want to say that because now he's going to lose, but I think
Why
Sinner
did
has
you
almost a
say that?
guaranteed win over Kashinov.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Oh,
I chose
okay.
Sinner too. I
Oh,
thought you were gonna get into the last one.
oh, Djokovic Manarino,
Yeah, yeah,
biggest lock Manarino upset.
yeah.
No, yeah, I'm going with Djokovic in that match.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Well, all
Dude,
right.
I think the Djokovic Manarino match is gonna be so boring to watch. All right, not boring to watch, but it's gonna be slow, like grinding, methodical tennis.
But yeah, those are our picks for the third and fourth round at this stage of the tournament.
Yeah, we got to track them too, and then report back.
Exactly. Are you ready to hop into segments?
Yeah, let's do it.
Alrighty, what's new in tennis? What'd you see this week?
Dude, so this week in tennis, I saw a pretty interesting Nick Kyrgios tweet. He said, "I think Tsitsipas wins the Aus Open." I feel like he's got to be trolling him because come on, their history, they have beef.
Yeah.
What?
I
There's
mean,
no
then
way
again,
he's serious.
maybe at this point, Kyrgios is so far removed from actually being a player that he
Yeah.
can just make comments like that. I mean, I saw him on a broadcast yesterday, and he's just like, I think it's hilarious that everyone in the broadcast booth is like wearing a suit. And then he just shows up. He's wearing a Lakers hat and a sweatshirt. And I'm like, dude, you don't look professional at all. What is this?
Yeah, that's just him. But I'm really curious to hear what you guys think, though. Do you think this tweet is serious? Do you think Nick Kyrgios was serious about Tsitsipas winning the Australian Open, or do you think he's trolling him?
Yeah.
And what did you see this week, Aiden?
Mine was Murray, like I talked about earlier. He said it was maybe his last time at the Australian Open. And I think really what he's looking for is like one last good run where he wins a couple of rounds at a Grand Slam, and then he'll feel okay to retire after that. But I think the flip side of that coin is if he wins a couple of rounds, he's going to be like, oh, I still have a little bit left. I can keep playing. But
Like Monfils?
yeah, exactly. But I just don't think he wants to retire after like a first round loss like this, where
Yeah, I don't think so
he
either.
got just crushed.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, the older you get, the more likely you are for this to happen. So
Yeah,
slippery
yeah.
slope.
I know. Well, remember his last year Australian Open, he had that awesome match against Kokkinakis. I think he came back huge deficit.
Yeah, and against Berrettini, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And do you remember that point that he had against Kokkinakis where Kokkinakis had like 3 or 4 overhead slams that he didn't put away that Murray just kept popping him up, popping him up?
Yeah, and that's what Murray probably enjoys doing
The
is
Murray
playing points
special.
like that where he's like, ha ha, you thought you had me beat, but I came back into it somehow.
Yep. All right, bet of the week. So we kind of touched on this before. We're both pro Deminar. I'm taking Deminar plus 115 over Rublev because I think Rublev gets shaken very easily. I think the crowd's going to get to him. He's playing an Australian, which is going to be huge. And I think this match will be a little bit of cat and mouse, which means that Rublev's going to run Deminar all over the court. I think he's going to hit very powerful like, baseline shots. But I think Deminar is going to get them all back. I think he's going to really show his athleticism. And I think that's going to frustrate Rublev even more, which is going to cause him to be more aggressive and take riskier shots, thus resulting in more airs. So I think Deminar has this one.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page there. I think
Mhm.
Deminar is just going to frustrate Rublev, and in the end, that's going to be enough, especially when the crowd is going to be completely for Deminar.
Exactly. All right. Who are you taking?
I'm taking Nori plus 220 over Rude. Almost went for the Borges bet, but I'm a lot less confident in that one than I am in this one. I just, like I said, I think Rude looked beatable versus Purcell. And I think Nori, while he wasn't dominant in his match either, I think he gets this one done. And I think he just needs to kind of follow the Purcell method and maybe just execute a little bit better.
Yeah, it's pretty good value too. Plus 220.
Exactly. How about a match of the week?
My match of the week, I touched on this before, but Rude outlasting Purcell. So the score is 6-3, 6-7, 6-3, 3-6, 7-6. This match had so much drama, and I was so tense watching this because I'm a huge Rude fan, and could just not bear the feeling if he lost to Purcell and didn't get this run. But credit to Purcell, he hit 93 winners and still lost this match. Like, how does
Jesus.
that even happen? And
That's
he
crazy.
approached the net about 100 times and won 72 points. He was about 70% at the net, which is very solid. So he played, I think this is one of those scenarios where he played the best he could. And unfortunately, his best wasn't enough to beat Rude.
Yeah, that's just a tough scenario. Hitting that many
Yeah.
winners and still losing is crazy.
Seriously, but no, it was awesome watching that match because the Zverev Klein match was also in the fifth set tiebreaker. So ESPN had the split screen, so you can watch both of them. And I was just like, "Holy shit, dude!" It was
That's
so
incredible.
late too, and I was trying to go to sleep, but now my heart rate was just through the roof watching this.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. My match of the week is Manarino winning in 5 versus Shelton, like I talked about. Score was 7-6, 1-6, 6-7, 6-3, 6-4. To me, this was a match that was kind of all about momentum. There was a lot of breaks. And it seems like to me, like Shelton was a player where his confidence just fluctuates a ton throughout the match because in some portions he'll be playing great and he'll be so confident in all his strokes. And then all of a sudden it slides out and he's playing not great and he has no confidence in his shots. And that's really, I think, what Manarino was trying to just maximize on was whenever Shelton lost a little bit of confidence, he was like, I'm just going to jump all over that.
Mhm.
And what's actually interesting was I feel like Shelton actually had momentum at the end of the match, but he's just fallen a little bit too far behind because he was actually down 2 breaks and then he broke back. But in the end, at 5-4, Manarino was able to hold serve. It almost didn't, though, because he was up 40-15 and actually double faulted and then won the match on just an unforced error by Shelton. And I think it was just a situation where Shelton didn't have a lot of confidence in his backhand at that point, and he just put it in the net.
Wow. Yeah, this was a super bummer for me because Shelton's one of my favorite players right now. So would have loved to see him make a run.
Yeah. You have a lot of favorite players, it sounds like.
Yeah. So for me, my favorite players right now, Shelton, Rude, and it's not that Rune is a favorite player of mine, but he's definitely like someone I want to see do well. Like I'll root for him just because I want to see him rival Alcaraz and I want to see him rival Sin.
Yeah. It's not like favorite players like just a guy you like Jari. What about him?
Oh, I love Jari. I love Jari and I love Stroop just because I feel like I found them a little early, like when they weren't top 30, top 40, they were kind of teetering around there. But yeah, you're right. I wouldn't say I have a lot of favorite players. Like Rude and Shelton are people that I like actually would get upset, if they lost and I really root
Yeah.
for them. The rest are players, like you said, that I like to see win.
100%.
Who are your favorite players right now?
I mean, I really like Deminar. I just like I every time
Yeah.
I talk about him, you got to talk about the scrappiness, the ability to just get around court and frustrate players. I mean, I like that Manarino's doing well. He's not really one of my favorite players, but I think it's hilarious that this guy at 36 is like playing the best tennis of his career.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, I mean Murray, I like to see do well. I like watching his matches, but kind of like the guys that just like frustrate their opponents, to be honest.
I guess we could see what the type of person you are.
Yeah.
All right, and that's the show. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at Painting Lines Podcast. Feel free to shoot us a DM or email us any questions or thoughts at paintinglinespodcast@gmail.com.